If I say that if Netaji were not there, India would not have become free in 1947. Because after this second war began and the non-cooperation movement by the Indian National Congress had fizzled out. If you look at the history of national freedom movement led by Mahatma Gandhi, after 1942, it was a non-event. Nothing was happened. We were all busy fighting ourselves. Because Muslim League under leadership of Muhammad Jinnah was fighting for separation, a separate homeland. So we were divided. British were enjoying it. There was no worthwhile resistance to the British rule in India. After 1942, in fact, after the war broke out. We kept saying that we will not cooperate. We kept asking the British to give us the promise that we will cooperate if you agree to make us independence, which they were not agreeable. But the fact is, on the ground, British had no problem. If I say that if Netaji were not there, India would not have become free in 1947. Because after this second war began and the non-cooperation movement by the Indian National Congress had fizzled out. If you look at the history of national freedom movement led by Mahatma Gandhi, after 1942, it was a non-event. Nothing was happened. We were all busy fighting ourselves. Because Muslim League under leadership of Muhammad Jinnah was fighting for separation, a separate homeland. So we were divided. British were enjoying it. There was no worthwhile resistance to the British rule in India. After 1942, in fact, after the war broke out. We kept saying that we will not cooperate. We kept asking the British to give us the promise that we will cooperate if you agree to make us independence, which they were not agreeable. But the fact is, on the ground, British had no problem. Unfortunately, after the British left, for a long period of time, we had systems which kept ignoring who we were or who we are, that is our heritage, our cultural heritage, our spiritual heritage, our civilizational heritage, and also we kept forgetting all those great people, all those martyrs and other freedom fighters who gave their life and blood for our independence. The nation set on building all anew, forgetting our heritage, forgetting our past heroes, as if everything began new after the British left. And in the process, we got confused because our heritage and our heroes, they live in our hearts, they live in our DNA. It's not easy to forget them, it's not easy to erase them. But this confusion has taken a huge toll on our national progress and also on our national esteem. I am thankful to the two speakers who gave a beautiful account. Thiru Rajsekhar gave the account of Netaji's journey in the submarine. Very informative, very exciting. Professor Prabal Rai Chaudhary gave a vivid account of his various facets of life, by and large not known to a larger public. The situations through which he went through, the sacrifices that he made, beyond what he did in the later part of his life. And I feel surprised that here in this land, because we know that in his Azad Hind Fauj, Indian National Army, perhaps the largest number of soldiers and commanders, those who fought, were from Tamil Nadu. They were Tamil people. And I'm not surprised because they were Tamil people who has fought the largest number, but surprised because we do not have much here by way of academic chairs to do researches on Netaji, to study and tell the students, tell the future generations what he did. And what our own people from this land, they did for the freedom of our country. Somehow, the national freedom movement has not got adequate attention here in this land. We have been celebrating, and rightly so, Velu Nachiyar, Veer Mangai. We are all proud of her. We do quote sometime Bharati, V.O. Chidambaram Pillai, and others. But there are large number of people from this land who have given their life for the freedom of our country. And perhaps a large number of them were associated with Netaji. They fought for the freedom of our country along with Netaji. And so it is natural for anyone to expect that in our university we will have Netaji chairs. And much more. Friends, while we talk about Netaji, and because whatever little knowledge is there in the public domain, because much more to be researched, much more to be disseminated to the larger audience. But the fact is that Netaji has not been adequately projected, adequately understood. And it is not for Netaji, it is for the benefit of us, for the country. Imagine, at that point of time, he had the vision to have a women battalion. Independent India took almost 7 decades to induct women in combat role in the Indian military. 7 decades. It took Prime Minister Modi to take a decision that no, our women must join the combat wing of the military also, because today war is all the more easier in the sense that it is more technology driven. Our women are flying fighter jets. They are conducting sensitive operations, essentially technology driven. They are at the frontier of every aspect of our national life. But for long we kept them confined only to the nursing part of the military. But Netaji was such a great visionary, such a far-sighted person. He did it at that point of time, and we have a living testimony of our Tirumati Lakshmi Krishna. You know, when we study this, a great person like Netaji, while we talk about what he did or she did, in case of Netaji, of course, what he did. But what is important, more important is the consequences of those acts. As if it appears, it is presented as if Netaji, okay, he led the Azad Hind Fauj and he fought. After that, it was disbanded and Netaji disappeared. But does that end there? If you look at the consequences of what Netaji did, then you realize the contribution of this great man. You know, if I say that if Netaji were not there, India would not have become free in 1947. Because after this second war began and the non-cooperation movement by the Indian National Congress had fizzled out. If you look at the history of national freedom movement led by Mahatma Gandhi, after 1942, it was a non-event. Nothing was happened. We were all busy fighting ourselves. Because Muslim League under leadership of Muhammad Jinnah was fighting for separation, a separate homeland. So we were divided. British were enjoying it. There was no worthwhile resistance to the British rule in India. After 1942, in fact, after the war broke out. We kept saying that we will not cooperate. We kept asking the British to give us the promise that we will cooperate if you agree to make us independence, which they were not agreeable. But the fact is, on the ground, British had no problem. In India, they could have continued for many more years. But Netaji, when he offered a military resistance when he stabilized the government in exile, Azad Hind Sarkar, backed by a military led by an able commander, and the military which fought the British on the ground, which defeated the British in several pockets of their strongholds. A visionary who had the vision to have alliances, military alliances with foreign powers. This military fight with the British by Indian soldiers, organized with a government in exile, recognized by a certain number of countries, equipped with military wares, that did not end with just disbanding of the Indian National Army. It ignited a fire within all the Indian soldiers within the British Army. And while we know that by September 1945, when it was disbanded, within a few months, within 6 months, Indians in British Navy revolted in February 1946. On 18th of February 1946, when the Indian Marines, Indian soldiers in the British Navy, they revolted and they took control of all the 20 warships of the British. The whole Indian Ocean, the whole Royal Navy was paralyzed. They were so scared. The British were so scared. And it did not end with that. While in the British Navy, they revolted and seized the warships with all the war guns. Indian Air Force went on a strike. Where did they get this inspiration? Because most of the soldiers who fought the British along with Netaji, they were also trained by the British. They were commanded by the British. But when it came to India's freedom, and when it came to the magical leadership of Netaji, the same Indian soldiers, those who had been listening, obeying the command of the British officers, they turned their gun against the British. The fact that an Indian soldier in the British army can fight the British and should fight the British for the independence of this country, this fire came from Netaji. And it was the consequence of that the Indian Navy, I should say the Indians in British Navy and Indians in British Air Force, they revolted. And when they revolted, there were repercussions in other uniformed forces in India. It happened in February 1946. British realized that it was not safe for them to be in India. Because after all, they were in India. On what security? On security provided by the very Indian soldiers. And when they realized that they could not trust the Indian soldiers anymore, they were pointing the guns against the British. In hurriedly out of fear, in March 1946, they said, we are going to leave India for the first time. They said in March 1946, we will make India independent, British will quit India in next 15 months. They even set the timeline because they were so scared that they said that if they keep it indeterminate, indefinite, what would happen, nobody knew. So they said to just assuage the sentiment of Indians that look, we are leaving and leaving with a deadline of next 15 months. And then they set the condition, you have the constitution. You have a constitution so that we know to whom to hand over the power. And that is how the cabinet mission plan constituted the Constituent Assembly of India. The Constituent Assembly of India, which eventually framed the Constitution of India, and India got independence under their leadership, was constituted out of fear by the British, fear of revolt by Indian soldiers. And that inspiration for that came from Netaji. You know, this aspect has not been researched. It has not even been talked about much. But it was mentioned in a short interview. I won't call it interview, a conversation. When Attlee, who was the Prime Minister of Britain during the time when India became independent, when he had visited Calcutta in 1950s, not as a Prime Minister, but as a member of British Parliament, but since he was the then Prime Minister, he was treated as a state guest, hosted in Raj Bhavan of Calcutta. Justice Mukherjee, who was the Chief Justice of Calcutta High Court, he was the acting governor. And over the breakfast, Chief Justice Mukherjee, who was the governor, asked Attlee that, look, I have a question, Mr. Attlee. What made you leave India so soon? Because after 1942, you had no resistance on the ground. You could have if you had chosen, you could have continued for some more time. What made you leave India so soon? And then he says, was it the non-cooperation of the Indian National Congress? And Attlee, with a smirk on his face, said, when he talked about impact of the non-cooperation, he said, minimal. That was not a factor. So what paid you? He said, it was the fear of the British that they were not secure in India after the revolt of the Navy and rebellion of the Air Force. In fact, when I read this, which is recorded in this State of the Nation book by Nari Feldman, the great jurist, I got curious. I thought that let us look into what could be, how serious could it be? And I happened to serve for a considerable number of years in the Intelligence Bureau, which was the premier intelligence agency, which is a successor of the British intelligence, which was there at the time. And I went into the archive of February, March, those days of 1946. And I was amazed to see the dispatches sent from India to the Britain, to their head office in Britain. Every day was a frightening report. The Central Intelligence, as it was called those days, they said, nothing can be said with a certainty. Anything can happen. Indians are all Indian forces, Indian police, besides Indian military, even Indian police is now in a ferment. You can't trust them. That kind of insecurity which the British get because of this, that they got so panicked that within a month of this revolt, they said they will make India free. Now, if you come to think of it, the consequence of what Netaji did. Netaji, this is far more important. And if one says that our freedom we owe to a great deal to Netaji, it is not an exaggeration. How can we put such a great person at the margin of our national freedom movement history? This is ingratitude of the highest order. And we are not ungrateful. We are not a nation of ungrateful people. We have to reclaim our proud legacy, proud heritage of Netaji's and his contributions to our motherland, Bharat. I would expect in our state, our universities, our intellectuals, our researchers to take up more and more projects on Netaji, on INA, contributions of people from Tamil Nadu. How much? Imagine, when I talk about Netaji's contribution to freedom movement, what was the strength of Netaji? Strength were largely the soldiers from this very place. And we have all the reasons to be proud of it. This needs to be studied, this needs to be highlighted, and information disseminated among our students, our future generations. Friends, I once again pay my respect to INA veterans. We will ever remain grateful to you for your services that you have rendered to the country. Those who are not there, their family members, to tell them that we are very proud and grateful to your elders, those who fought, and other national freedom fighters. We shall ever be grateful to all of you and your elders. Friends, thank you for organizing this event. I would like to thank the Anna University, the Vice Chancellor, for taking the initiative, making it happen. I wish you all the very best. Once again, Jai Hind!